What's going on, YouTube community? Once again, it's your host, Arachnid, so intellectual, voracious, and passionate about whatever I'm passionate about today. As always, I'm so excited to do this interview. You see the very attractive young Canadian girl on the screen. It's Jane Ozkowski, and I'm so excited to have her here. Jane, what's going on?
Hello, not too much. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so in the past, I've done these inside the Commentator studios, and they've all been so serious because I like to show that I've got range, you know? I don't want the people
Of
to
course,
think
of course.
I'm the same guy all the time, but I guess the biggest compliment that I could give to you, Jane, is, and I mean this honestly, I've watched so many of your videos, and I get your sense of humor, and to me, yes, you are one of the funniest people that I've seen.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm flattered. I don't even know what to say. Thank you.
Well,
I try my best. I practice a lot.
Okay, so we're gonna have a link to Jane's stuff in the description, and I have to tell you what she does is she's an English lit major, right? I was very good at English lit. I've got pretty good diction. I'm very articulate. I read certain things.
You
And
know
I
how to
actually,
read. It's good.
yeah, I can do some of the reading when I go
Oh,
on the
yeah.
internet.
Yeah, I've heard of that before, reading.
Yeah, okay, so what Jane does is she reads poetry, but before she reads poetry, she'll come on and she'll do, I don't want to call it stand-up because she's sitting down, but she'll do some sit-down comedy a little bit to get the audience warmed up, to work the room, maybe get a couple of tips for the waitresses or whoever is serving the drinks that night in her bedroom or living room. And then she goes into the comedy, or there's the comedy, then she goes into the poetry, and every time I see it, and like I said, you guys are going to have the link in the description below, but every time I see it, I think, this is a girl I would hang out with. She reminds me so much of all the best people I hung out with in New York, and she's funny and nice, and sure, she'll have the occasional drink, you can't blame her, but Jane, how'd you come up with this concept?
Ooh, I guess because there are so many videos on the internet already about, or just like random poetry videos, and people I find tend to take themselves far too seriously. I find like poetry can be fun. It can be not just, oh, here I am reading a poem about like my sorrow, wilting roses, things like that. I think it's good to show personality, to show kind of where these stories are coming from. I like to do a little preamble, like you said, where I just kind of talk about, I guess, the inspiration for the poem or whatever I'm doing. So that's why I wanted to balance it out. I find a lot of the poetry that I write, it does get kind of depressing, so I like to try to balance it by saying some funny things to begin with to let people know, it's okay to be happy, to have some joy in your life. I find people that are generally watching poetry videos, they're kind of sad. I need to bring some joy
Right.
into people's lives.
Well, and the way that I found you was I was just typing in my name to see if anybody was doing anything with my name or what would come up, and one of your poems, Arachnid something came up, and
Hmm.
I thought, okay, listen, this has all the makings of something that I would watch. It's got Arachnid in the title, so I'm already there. The girl's good looking, so I'm staying here. And then you started talking and you were funny and I liked that. And you went into the poetry and I thought, okay, there's an interesting juxtaposition. The comedy now with the tragedy and this poem about, it was about people's eyeballs and rotting flesh. And I thought, oh, that's nice. And then she comes back out of it at the end and she's happy again. And I said, I'm hitting that subscribe button.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it can be. I'm always worried that it's a little jarring because it does get, like, some of the stuff that I write does get very serious. And so I find the more serious things that I write, the more, like, the funnier that I try to be and the more energetic that I try to be to begin with. If only just to balance out all of this, like, really kind of grotesque stuff that I write about. Yeah, the one that you're talking about, Arachnid Apocalypse, I think it's
Yeah.
about, like, people using, like, spiders coming to infest the city and like using people's bodies as like their bricks and then like eating their eyeballs. So I like to balance that with some jokes to begin with, get the whole spectrum of emotion coming out.
Right. I actually remember when I was younger, and I wasn't suicidal, but I think I was in junior high at the time, and I said to myself, well, if I ever did want to commit suicide, I don't want to take time to have to write a suicide note because it's going to slow me down by the time I'm done. Maybe I won't want to do it anymore. Or in the meantime, I'll see a commercial on TV for something that's coming on Tuesday that I'm going to say, hey, I want to watch that episode of
Exactly.
Will and Grace. So what I did was I wrote this suicide note, which was actually a very good poem that I still have.
Oh,
And
way.
and then later in high school, I had an assignment in like an English lit class, and I hadn't written anything. And I remember grabbing this poem, and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna write my name on the top of it. And I turned it in, and I actually got an A+ on it. And I remember thinking, man, this is a great teacher who realizes talent, but at the same time, maybe a bad teacher who doesn't realize red flags.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
are you asking if I'm suicidal? Is that
no,
the
I
question that
well, I don't
you're
think you should
asking?
be. I
I'm not.
think,
I'm
you
quite
know,
happy.
well, no, Jane, this isn't like an intervention where I thought,
Or
hey, this girl's
YouTube
she's on the
therapy
edge.
session.
No,
There.
it's
Mhm.
well,
Thank
I'd
you.
be listen, I like to think that that I'm the kind of person where if someone's doing something, I encourage them. So I might be the wrong person in that situation because whereas a lot of people would try to talk them out of it, I would say, I think it's a very ballsy move. I'm just saying I couldn't do it, you know.
That's,
Hey, I don't know, maybe you got your reasons. That's all I'm saying, but anyway, Jane, let me ask you. You post all these poems and all these YouTube videos, and I always say to myself, she's so fascinating. And she tells these stories about how she met some guy outside, or she went to a bar with friends or something. Is there any? Are you thinking at all about taking the camera out there? I'd like to see what's going on in the park and with the friends and at the bar.
um, honestly, no. I'm the worst. I have a camera on my phone that I've taken 2 pictures with. I find like it's so hard for me to like step out of a moment to do anything else that I couldn't see myself ever being that person that's like, oh, I'm going to record here. I'm also, I guess you probably wouldn't even notice from my videos, but I am like, I would get so self-conscious. Like, I would feel so self-conscious, like taking a video in a bar. Even here, I feel like really awkward that this is videotaped. So I can't even imagine like going out in public and like taking a video like in the bar with my friends, something like that. I mean, it would be an interesting experience, but I just feel like I'm not the person to do it because I get really immersed in things. I can only do like I'm not a multitasker at all. I can only do like one thing at once. So I don't think I would even remember to like when I'm out with my friends. Oh, I have to take like pictures of this thing to remember it. So I
Oh,
don't
well,
think that. Yeah.
all right, guys. So yeah, she's on to the fact that we put the camera in her house. I I wasn't sure that you'd picked up on it yet, but I thought you were just looking into that cup of coffee you like to have when you come home. But I apparently see the red light in the handle.
It's there. I know. I know all about it. It's been there for weeks, but you
Well,
know.
let me ask you something else. I see that you have an ongoing struggle in your videos with your bangs. The bangs always want to
I
come down.
do.
They always want that guest spot, and you've always got to brush them out. I don't want to be controversial here. I don't
All
like to
right.
work blue, but maybe a little scrunchy, a hair clip.
Mm-mm. I'm
Nothing.
very, honestly, my mood is mostly dependent on one, the weather, and two, how good my hair looks for the day.
Right.
So, I mean, there's no way I could do a scrunchie or something like that because I feel like I wouldn't look nearly as good. So,
Okay.
they're here to stay in my face. I'll just sweep them to the side. I'm doing the like 16-year-olds from 2005 look where the like
Right.
emo kid style. Yeah.
Right. Well, you're pulling it off.
Thank you.
I I think you have a very interesting Canadian style. That's how I think a girl from Toronto should dress.
Oh, maybe. I like to think that I'm a trendsetter. I tell people how to dress, or I don't like in my head I judge people on Sunday.
Right. Okay. So when you started out on YouTube, what exactly was your goal or your vision for what your channel would become?
Well, honestly, I'm still working on it. Like I'm basically doing these videos as a means to get more attention, more attention for my writing. The plan is to be like the best. It sounds ridiculous, but I just want to be the best writer that has ever lived.
Right.
And one way to do that, I think, is to get an audience and build an audience, and then from there, when I'm looking for, I've written a novel and I'm looking for like agents and publishers now. I think it's very helpful if you have a bit of an internet following already and are at least internet savvy.
Right.
Then that I find is helpful. So that is the plan, or was the original plan, which I'm still, I guess, working toward.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you've got a good shot at it. I think you're very interesting because, like I said, you're brilliant with the comedy and then you're brilliant with the poetry to the point where I almost think if you went to some lounges or something up there in Canada, or you travel to my neck of the woods and you hit some bars in New York, I would love to see you, do some of that poetry, and you could come out and you could be your own MC. I know you might be a little bit shy or nervous or whatever, but your personality is much larger than the little webcam you have.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I've thought about like doing stand-up comedy before, something like that. I think my main passion is poetry, though, and I'm trying to just kind of like use my personality to sell this
Right.
this writing, and maybe it is helping me find an audience that wouldn't normally be like looking for poetry videos on the internet. Like, I don't know if you are generally
No.
watch videos of people reading poetry, but
No, hey, Jane, like we talked about this before. You were my first, and you were gentle, so I have to thank you for that. No, I generally don't, look for the poetry videos as much as I enjoy poetry. I used to read a lot of Shel Silverstein. I
he's
even have to.
great.
I have to raise my hand and say, Jewel writes poetry, and I remember having her book growing up and reading Jewel's poetry. So
I had no idea that she did.
yeah, well, yeah, and and she's actually not bad. I mean, she writes songs and she writes really decent poetry, but it was never something that I thought to look up on YouTube. I just, like I said, kind of stumbled onto it. Let me ask you about something else. I've heard some rumors. I don't know if it's true. I've heard that Jane has a motorcycle license. Is this true?
It is true. How did you hear that?
I read it on your website.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I actually work for a motorcycle school when I'm not writing poetry. So I got my license through that school. So I basically, I work for a motorcycle school. I talk about motorcycles like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, which isn't really at all related to my interests or anything, but it's quite a fun, cool job. And so I have a motorcycle license. I don't have a motorcycle. If someone on the internet would like to buy me one, I'd be okay with that.
Okay, let me ask you something, because I know down here, if I want to ride a bike, it's got to be certain brands. If I had a Harley, it'd be fine. If I had a Yamaha, maybe I take that out at night when everyone's asleep. Is there pressure in Canada to have a Harley because it's closer to the Canadian border than to have a Yamaha per se?
Honestly, I have no idea. That is a good question. I don't think I'd be the one to answer it.
Okay.
Maybe. I think if I were to have a bike, I would get like a cruiser, maybe a Harley, as opposed to like a sport bike or something.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Or the little sidecar, so you can take a pet with you, a Great Dane or something with a helmet on.
I would love that, actually. I ride a bicycle. Not nearly, well, pretty cool. I love my bicycle a lot. Pocahontas. I was riding my bicycle one day, and I came across a man on, I think, a Harley, and he had a sidecar, and in the sidecar there was another man who was playing the accordion, riding down like downtown Toronto, and I loved it. So I would be that person, probably in the sidecar with the accordion, if I knew how to play.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, the only thing better than that would be if there was a man with another man who was in a sidecar, and the man in the sidecar had another little sidecar with a smaller man in
Oh
it.
my gosh, and then a tiny accordion, just
Right.
forever.
You could keep going. It could be like those Dutch puzzles where you keep taking them apart, and there's a
Yes.
smaller and smaller, odd-looking human.
Just man with accordion.
Yeah,
Oh.
I remember getting one of those Dutch puzzles or whatever it was as a kid and thinking, okay, I'm 6, but I know this isn't art. I'm just telling you guys, this
I
doesn't
get
look
it.
like a human.
Yeah.
This looks like
By
a
the
pear.
Yeah.
with smaller pairs in it.
It's true. It's true.
So what percent of your poetry is stuff that you found that you like versus which percent is stuff that you've actually written?
Ooh, all of it is stuff that I've written.
Okay.
So everything on my all my videos are just poems that I've written based basically on my life.
All right, I feel like I've got to go into some of the poems, but
Sure.
the thing is, I don't really remember the title, but I
Oh,
remember
that's
what they're
okay.
about.
I'm sure I can remember the title or try to.
Uh, An interesting one that I watched was the one. It was not quite autobiographical, but there was enough substance there that people could hook onto it. It was about having a friend who felt like doing drugs, and you didn't want to do drugs, but the guy wants you to stay and watch him and be his protector, and the burden that is on you.
Yeah, that actually is not super autobiographical, which is surprising.
But it
Not
was
surprising,
good.
but it's thank you. Yeah, I forgot all about that one. Um, yeah, so that one, I don't know. I think it is kind of like a little bit based on life experiences of having to be that person. You know, you have that like friend that gets too drunk, and you're just like, oh my gosh, now I have to like deal with you and
Right.
like change your vomit bags and whatever else. So yeah, it's basically
Yeah.
based on that, the quintessential teen slash early 20s experience.
I remember having a friend. I grew up with her, and she was very prim and proper. And one day she went out and she bought some weed, and she wanted me to be there to watch her, right? Okay, now she starts smoking the weed, and I remember telling her two things. Number one, you got to take it out of the plastic first, because she
Oh
didn't
my
do that.
gosh.
And number two, I'm sure you'll be fine on your own.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's
It's
not,
just
you know,
weed. You'll be
yeah,
okay.
it wasn't really anything hard, but I love that poem because yeah, just the way that you worked in the potato chips and the I was like, where is she going with this? But it was like an episode of Seinfeld. It all made sense until the potato chips, but then you brought it back around, and I'm like, oh, that's a pretty brilliant observation she put in there.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I try, and I think I have been more. I wrote that from maybe, I forget, about a year ago. But I think I have been even more trying to work multiple themes into what I'm writing. So I'll try to kind of like juxtapose a few things together, kind of in a similar way to that I do like comedy and then like relatively dark poetry and then comedy again.
Right.
I'm trying to kind of more work on doing that in the stuff that I'm writing as well, and hopefully doing it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that on your channel that you kind of take you have different categories. You have different seasons and series, and you did the Toronto Happiness Program because you figured it's getting kind of cold and gray outside and people might want to be cheered up. And I remember when I stumbled across that first poem, the Arachnid one, I thought, is she still doing this? I hope so because I want to contact her. And to see you're still doing it and you're sticking with it is awesome. What can we expect to see on the channel next?
Ooh, okay, well, we're going into a summer season. I was actually just telling my friend who's wandering around in the background here. I feel like in the summer you have an excuse to do a lot more things than you do in the winter. You can behave far more poorly. So this summer I think it's going to be looser. The poems will be shorter and they'll probably be more surreal. So by last season, the Toronto Happiness Program, that was more like basically 100% episodes from my own life. But I think this next season I'm going to go back into more like strange surrealist mode. So I've
Right.
got one that I'm working on about this hospital waiting room that is also a diner, and like there's blood all over the floor and then flowers growing out of the blood.
Right.
So a whole bunch of things like that, just the usual stuff like that. So that is kind of the direction that I'm going to be going into for the summer. Just like very,
Uh-huh.
very strange. A lot of like weird birds turning into like paper bags, things like that.
Right. Well, I mean, once again, to anyone watching this, Jane Ozkowski, a woman after my own heart. Food and then gore. I mean, it all works together. I love the juxtaposition once again. I'm really looking forward to all your stuff. I've never been more excited to actually have someone on. I'm so glad that I contacted you and you said yes. And it all worked out. Please come back, Jane. Will you come
I
back?
will, absolutely. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So, boys and girls, anyone watching this, miscreants, ne'er-do-wells, whoever you are, it's been Jane Ozkowski. We have her link in the description. I had a blast. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Once again, it's been your host, Arachnid Soul, intellectual, voracious, and passionate about Jane, as always. And Jane, I remember your poem Gladiolus, so Gladiolus for you.
Thank you, thank you.
And guys, I will catch you later.